is really an honor and privilege to be here. And I need to acknowledge, first of all, the incredible job that this Thrive organization is doing. And Steve, I know that this is really close to your heart. We've talked a lot about it, so I'm delighted to be here. And although I was very blessed to have such a great organization to help with mental health issues. So you have to bear with me tonight because I'm basically taking a day-long presentation and putting it into an hour. So I'm going to ask all of you to please silence your cell phones. I'm also acknowledging that there'll be time for questions after the presentation, and then in order to be environmentally friendly, the referenced handouts, everything that you're going to see up here today will be available on the Thrive website. I don't know when, but it will be. Okay, they can tell you that later. When I do any kind of group work, and sometimes even with couples, one of the things I usually do is ask people to take a minute or two to get quiet and get kind of grounded and centered. There's two reasons for that. Usually it just kind of helps get you here. Everybody's been working all day, dinner, running around to get here. In addition to that, even more importantly though, is it's a great tool that I'm going to teach you of breathing. It's very simple, so easy. You don't have to do anything weird. You won't embarrass yourself, okay? But it's a really simple tool that then you can take with you, okay? So what I'm going to ask you to do is just put both your feet flat on the ground. You're just going to go, this would be maybe a minute at the most. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, and if you're not comfortable doing that, just to look down at the ground. What I'm going to ask you to do is just, first of all, feel your feet against the rug. Just notice if you're even able to feel your feet. When you do, notice the temperature of your feet. Notice whether your feet feel heavy or light, if they're tight or relaxed. And then bring your awareness to your belly. And I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath from your belly all the way up to the tips of your shoulders. Fill your body. And when you get to the tips of your shoulders, I'm going to ask you to hold that breath for the count of 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm going to start that in just a second, but I'm going to ask you while you do that, or particularly after you're done, when we finish this up, just to observe your body and the physical sensations and how your body feels after you take these breaths. So I'm going to ask you to take a second and we're going to breathe. Take a big deep breath from the bottom of your belly to the tips of your shoulders, and then hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, and then very slow and steady, gently relaxed, let it out. All the way out, like you're at the end of the toothpaste and you don't have any more. And then we're going to do 2 more breaths like this. Take a big long deep breath all the way to your shoulders, and then hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it. Slow and steady, gently release. And last time, big long deep breath to the tips of your shoulders for the count of 4, 3, 2, 1. And then very gently release. I'm going to ask you just for another second or two to keep your eyes closed, come back to normal breathing. But be aware of how your body feels right now. If it feels the same, feels different. And also be aware of the energy in the room, how it feels. Just by taking 3 or 4 deep breaths, the difference it can make. And then I'm going to ask you to take a big deep breath to come back into the room. No sleeping. And just observe your body, because I'm aware that the energy in the room shifted and became much more grounded. And that's what this does, because when you're dealing with addiction, there's usually a tremendous amount of anxiety that's going on. And if you grew up in a family where there was addiction, you lived with a lot of anxiety, so even if you're not living with somebody who's got a person who has an addiction now, your body has been programmed physiologically, okay? So there's neural pathways, and so the anxiety goes. So one of the things you can do to help yourself feel better, and also, as we talk later on, make healthier choices, is just get centered and grounded within yourself. Okay, so obviously my wish for everyone here is that by educating yourself and being here, and learning about how addictions impact the entire family as a system, that you will feel a sense of hope that healing is possible. And I really congratulate and applaud all of you for having the courage to come here tonight. I'm not giving a seminar on how to win the lottery, okay? This is a very challenging, very vulnerable topic for people, and I want you to know that I'm very mindful and aware of that. So you need to give yourself a pat on the back, because it takes courage to take a look at this stuff. It's not easy. So, before I go here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what qualifies me to be standing on this stage, besides what Steve told you. Two grandfathers that were alcoholics. One was violent and so abusive that my grandmother, when he beat her up, lost a 6-month-old pregnancy. Another grandfather in Ireland that his drinking was so bad that he basically lost most of the family fortune and decisions that he made. I have 3 siblings that, thank God, are on recovery for over 20 years, and 2 of them for over 35 years. So I have uncles and aunts. I mean, it just goes on and on. But it definitely, you know, and I'm Irish Catholic, so we tend to be prone genetically to that illness. I have a couple nieces and nephews that thankfully are in recovery now that have had drug addictions. So I want you to know that when I first went to graduate school, I was the only person in our graduate program that was learning about addictions. I had an internship at Tufts Union Medical Center in Boston, and it was a substance abuse clinic. Back then I called it the pre-Oprah world. Nobody was talking about this stuff. In fact, we never even heard the word incest or sexual abuse the whole time that I was there. So this was early on, and then I call it the Oprahization of the world. When things started coming out, people started talking about things. So when I was in graduate school, and I'm learning about this, I have a brother who's now sober 38 years, but he and I had always been close, and it was clear he was so troubled. And when I talked to my parents, I said, I think what's going on, because you know, he's the problem child, so I think what's going on is that he's an alcoholic and a drug addict. And my dad said, I even have this letter he sent me saying, oh, no, you know, he's just going through a period, you know, he's just going through a period. And in fact, boys, their insurance is even more for cars than girls. This is just a boys will be boys thing, right? It would have been 6 years and his life was a mess. So, long story short, I came back to Chicago. My brother, and I'm telling you this to you because I think it's important. My brother took 5 years to get sober. 5 years. He was in and out of 20 treatment centers. And from the plushes to being city funded, and you know, I don't know if they gave him water. So he went through a lot, but he finally got sober, thank God, because he has been an enormous gift to my whole entire family. He helped us through his recovery process be able to connect and grow and have relationships with each other that I don't know that we could have ever had if we hadn't gone through those really difficult times. And I will tell you, when I lived in Boston, every time the phone rang after 10 o'clock, I thought, this is the call. I'm sure many of you can relate to this. This is the call, he's dead. Okay, that didn't happen, but it was very scary and very hard. And so when I came back to Chicago and I would get together with him, half the time he wouldn't show up, right, because alcohol's so unpredictable. So then we made a deal that if he called me and that day he hadn't been using, and I was free, we could get together. So we would do that. And then I found myself having to pull over on the way home because I was sobbing so bad I could not drive. My once beautiful, handsome, fun, likable brother looked like he was this old sick guy in his 60s and he was 22 years old. Hasty, bloated, looked horrible. So I know what it's like to feel that anxiety of someone you love having an addiction. And, you know, I went through all the things I'm going to talk about, the cajoling, the begging, trying to get them to get it. Like all the stuff that people do who have loved ones who have addictions. And at the time I was in therapy and I also started going to Al-Anon. And one of the things that I ended up doing was saying to my brother, I can't see you anymore. Even if you haven't been drinking that day, I have a hangover for 3 days, an emotional hangover, feeling so much pain from being around you, I can't do it anymore. I will be with you in any way I can, if and when you get sober and you follow the protocol that they're recommending, but I cannot be around you any longer. I love you too much, but I have to love myself, and it's too hard. And actually, it wasn't too much time after that he did get sober. I'm not saying it's me, but I'm putting it out there to you that when you change the family dynamics, and you don't do the same dance that you've been doing to try to get them to understand or get them to change, it changes things in the family. Because often what happens is that the addicted person ends up getting in a power struggle with people in the family, especially if it's a spouse or a child or a parent. And so then their focus and their energy is going into being in a power struggle with you. And again, all this is unconscious, okay? It's not a conscious thing. So when people go to Al-Anon, which I highly recommend, and I don't think you have to be a lifer. Some people think you do. I don't. But even just go for a little while to get some information and learn how to detach with love. That when you do that, what happens is you bring the energy that you're putting out there towards them, and they're naturally going like this. You bring that energy back to you, and guess what happens? They're like this. I go, wait a minute. And then that gives them an opportunity to look at themselves. Okay? So I'm going to get into that in a minute about family stuff. So this is what I'm hoping more than anything you take away from tonight. You're not alone, and you're not crazy. Because addiction is crazy making. The information I'm sharing with you can begin to help you understand why you may have patterns, behaviors, and feelings that are creating great dysfunction and discomfort in your life. Hopefully tonight will help you gain better insight into what you can get in the way of you making changes to better yourself, not the person with the addiction. Despite what might be going on around you, it's crucial that you take care of yourself. If someone you love is in trouble, it doesn't do them any good to lose yourself in their craziness. You can heal even if they don't. It's hard to imagine, right? Because if they're not okay, I'm not okay. And then, I like this. Change is possible, whether your loved one suffering with addiction gets help or not. But I like that. Don't give up. You're not alone, and you matter. You matter. Not just the person with the addiction. And how this series came to be was that a colleague and I were talking about how there are such little resources for the family, even in treatment centers. They go, if you can afford to put a relative or a friend into a treatment center, they're like 50 grand half the time a month, right? And then what they do is they have the family come out for a weekend or 5 days. And they call it a family disease, but basically, since I was in graduate school, not a whole lot has changed. Not a whole lot at all. It's really disappointing. Do you know that doctors, for the most part, I know there's a physician here, but they usually get in medical school about 4 hours of education on addictions. And people are not teaching doctors about how maybe a lot of people coming in to see them that have a lot of illnesses, especially stomach problems, ulcers, how they might be dealing with an addiction in their home, in their family, or friends, or work. They're not trained to assess that or ask about it. And the research has shown that the amount of money that people who are family members of people with addictions spend on somatic, physical problems is so high, but yet they still will pay for treatment for people that we want to call codependent. I hate that word, I don't know, but I don't know a better replacement. We'll talk about that in a second. But that means that, basically in a nutshell, a codependent is somebody who your sense of well-being is based on something or someone else. If they're okay, I'm okay. If I get the right guy to love me, then I'm okay. If I get in the right school, my kid gets in the right school, I'm okay. Instead of feeling secure from within. Okay? So, I want to talk a little bit for a minute about what is addiction anyway. So, I've written this down. It's an illness of escape. Its goal is to obliterate, self-medicate, and/or ignore reality. And it's an alternative to letting oneself feel hurt, betrayal, worry, and most painful of all, loneliness, and all the other feelings. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing in the last, I don't know how many years, is that a great many people who have addictions actually have anxiety and depression disorders. And so what they originally were doing was trying to self-medicate some of that. That's why I had you guys do that grounding thing, okay? Because anxiety feels overwhelming, so people often, they're experimenting with something, they take it, and they're like, oh, I feel really calm, I feel good. Because their body doesn't do that naturally. So then they keep using, and then the very thing that they were using to help themselves feel better now becomes a problem in and of itself. And again, addiction can take time. Like my brother, he was clearly alcoholic by the time he was 16. That's not the norm. I mean, he used to joke and say, even the alcoholic uncles in my family thought he was an alcoholic. But they were, slowly on the normal progression of taking 8 to 15 years before they experienced any problems. In fact, I grew up in a family where drinking was the norm, and it was seen as fun, and it was always part of every occasion. And it really did not become problematic for my uncles and aunts until they were later on, like in their 50s and 60s, and then you could really see how it was impacting them. Okay, I like this. What do alcoholics and chemists have in common? They both view alcohol as a solution. You gotta have a little levity, right? Okay, so when we're looking at whether or not someone is abusing a substance or shopping, gambling, whatever, these are the determining factors in identifying whether something's an addiction. There's an unpredictability in the usage. There's an inconsistency, like I was saying with my brother. Sometimes he'd show up, sometimes he wouldn't. Those of you who live with somebody who's an alcoholic or have dealt with a parent or someone, you know that you can't count on them. You might count on them to show up, but you maybe can't count on them to behave themselves appropriately, right? Or you might not be able to count on them if it's somebody's birthday that, if they're going out for a drink after work, there's a chance they might not show up no matter how much they love somebody. So the inability to control the usage, there's actually a saying in Alcoholics Anonymous that is, one drink is too many and 1,000 is not enough. And that's what a lot of people understand, and that's what's crazy making, is often people have addictions, they can seem to be doing fine. We went out Friday night, he had 2 drinks, he was fine. But then Sunday, I asked him to, at the family party, and next thing you know, he's blasted. And that's what's crazy making for the family, because they're thinking, what is this guy screwing around with me? Like, I asked him, he promised. They can't control it. That's the thing, it's unpredictable. It's unpredictable whether or not, for an alcoholic, whether a drink is going to be just 1 or 2, or next thing you know, they might get a blackout and pass out somewhere, or they don't know what's going to happen. In fact, in AA, one of the things they talk about, when you have a craving for a drink, is to think through the drink. And that means don't just think about, yahoo, we're going to have a good time at this party. You think through, oh God, last time I got picked up for a DUI, oh God, I ended up in bed with some guy that I don't even know, oh my God. So you think it through about why for you, drinking is not something you can predict what might happen. Kind of like if every once in a while, when I ate strawberries, I broke out in a big rash. But not all the time. Okay, well, first of all, that's not going to be really a problem, right, in terms of my life. Unless maybe I'm getting married and I decide to have strawberries the day before. You gonna risk that? No. Okay? So, the addicted person often behaves in ways that go against their value system. I remember this very sad thing happened. Long story short, but I was at a bar years ago, and one of my brother's friends was there, and it was we were planning a class reunion, so it was a Thursday night at 11 o'clock. Normally, never that would be happening. So we're in this bar in our old neighborhood we grew up. One of my brother's friends sitting there, and I knew this guy had been alcoholic probably since he was 20, right? And I saw him, he's like, oh, Mary, how are you? How's your brother? Blah, 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 we're talking. I know he's there every single night. And you know what? He's pulling out his wallet, showing me pictures of his kids, telling me how they are the love of his life, how much he loves being a dad, how great his kids are. And I'm just looking at him thinking, oh God, so sad. Because I know he loves his kids. But he should have his ass in his house, putting his kids to bed instead of sitting in this bar. That's what I mean, goes against their value system, despite their best intentions. So when somebody says, I'm really sorry, yeah, sometimes it can be manipulative, right? But a lot of times with an addict, they are remorseful, they are sorry. But when they're active in their disease, they can't stop themselves. And it's really important for you to understand, and we'll talk about that later, but loved ones are powerless, and there are many and usually futile attempts to help and control the person with the addiction. Okay, so that means hiding the booze, that means saying you gotta be home at a certain time, or whatever it is, but in attempts to control. It's futile. Because the unpredictability and consistency. They might do really good for a while, but that's not the issue. It's not about being good. It's about being sick with an addiction. Okay, so in order to develop and maintain an addiction, one must create and live in a world of denial, dishonesty, rationalization, delusion, justification, and fantasy. So that's why I like this thing next to it. You're not in love, you're just drunk, right? Because people, in AA, another saying is that you don't have a drinking problem, you have a thinking problem. Because in order to develop and maintain an addiction, you have to lie to yourself. They're not just lying to all you. They're lying to themselves about the reality of what's going on. And so the neural pathways in their brain are different than other people who do deal with reality. However, the thing is that a lot of times this is what family members do too in order to survive. Deny things. So I was at a reunion thing with friends from grammar school, and one of them had been married to this guy, had been clear. Everybody in the world knew he'd been an alcoholic since he was like 17. I mean, he would pass out, it was sad, it was so obvious that John had this horrible drinking problem. And so I saw his wife, who's lovely, and she had gotten divorced from him. And I said, Mary, I always really liked John. I go, but I sure can understand why it'd be so hard living with him with his drinking problem. She looked at me and said, what drinking problem? Really, I just couldn't even believe that he was a neighborhood drunk, right? And what drinking problem? And she's divorced from him, so she didn't even need to pretend anymore for herself. But that's how deep denial goes. So we're going to talk about that now. That leads us into addiction is a family disease. All right? So it's really important to understand the family system as the identified patient instead of just the addict or the drunk. Everyone has a part to play in a system. Think about it, those of you at jobs. There's systems, whether you're a teacher in a school, the system, how it works. We talk about the bureaucracy. But systems have a way of working, and they're always trying to stay in balance. So think about a mobile above baby's bed, right? If you took one little teddy bear off, what would happen? That's what happens when actually the identified patient, who's often the person with the addiction, when they get better, sometimes that's really uncomfortable for the family, as much as they've been talking about wanting it, and if only they got sober, everything would be okay. And so the family has been unconsciously putting all their energy and focus into fixing that person instead of maybe other issues that might exist. Like often people who marry people with addictions come from families where there's addictions, and they never dealt with that. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with women that married 2 or 3 alcoholics right in a row. So what also happens is that as the addict's addiction progresses, family members simultaneously develop an addiction to the addict. So we're going to talk about that in a minute, more about that. But they have the same kinds of symptoms as somebody with an addiction. The addicted person, addicted to the substance, the codependent. I got to come up with another name. Anybody has it, I would really love to know. It gets addicted to the addict because your sense of well-being is dependent on them, just like their sense of well-being is dependent on their substance. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in these. You will have these. There's books. I've given resources with all kinds of information to do some further reading. But because we're limited on time, I want to get everything else in. So there's roles, these are roles of adult children of alcoholics. They did a lot of research and they found that there's the role of the addict, the enabler, who's often a parent or a spouse, the hero, that's the kid who brings self-esteem to the family, the scapegoat, that's usually the addicted person, the mascot, that's the person who's funny and makes everybody laugh and distracts from what's really going on, and the lost child, that's usually the kid everybody says, we don't have to worry about her. She's great, she's doing good. Okay? So, these are the rules in families where there's addictions. 3 rules. Really, if you remember anything tonight, this is the most important. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. I'm working with a guy right now that his wife is leaving him, or they're getting a divorce. Really nice man. They've been married for about 20 years, have 3 kids. And she said to him, I'm just not attracted to you anymore. Now, I love this guy. So we talked about how he could either be the victim because she's like having a midlife thing going on, or he could take responsibility and look at the fact that he came from an alcoholic family where he learned these rules, and he was not honest with her throughout most of their marriage with each other because he grew up in an alcoholic family where he learned this. So he didn't tell her when she wanted to get engaged before he did that he wasn't ready. He didn't tell her that when she wanted to move the burbs that he didn't want to move the burbs. He didn't let himself feel any anger or frustration because he was so worried because his parents had gotten divorced. He was so worried that she would leave him that he went along with everything she wanted. And in the end, it bit him in the butt because she wasn't attracted to him because he was like a little kid instead of an adult. Whatever you want, mommy. And that happens. Okay, so we're not here for that. But anyway, all systems have rules that are overt and covert. So think about your own family. Sometimes it's you cannot go in somebody else's room without knocking and go in their drawers. It might be that you need to, or we have dinner together a few nights a week. It might be, you get what I'm saying, right? So there's rules. But then there's the covert rules. And often those are things like, I'll ignore your drinking if you ignore my shopping. I'll ignore your drinking if you ignore that I've got a boyfriend. Okay? We won't talk about what's really going on here because that would be too hard. God knows what would happen in our family if we did. So kids grow up with these spoken and unspoken rules, conscious and unconscious. And the thing is, this is really important. These rules are the reason why dysfunction often continues generationally, even when there's no active substance abuse in the next or previous generation. My mother was enraged when my brother became an alcoholic because she didn't drink, or she had a martini once in a while. My dad wasn't an alcoholic. And she grew up with this horrible alcoholic behavior going on. And when her son, and I know what happened years later, was that it was actually really traumatic for her. But my mother was unconscious about that, and my mother never dealt with her father's alcoholism and how maybe it affected her. Because that's how she survived. Go on, I'm going to have a different life, not going to be like that. I'm going to have the perfect family. Okay, like her favorite TV shows was that one on the prairie thing. Like she loved shows like that, right? All the shows that were like the perfect families. And so what happens then is that the same rules are going on, and so people don't have the skills and the tools to know how to deal with their emotions. And so that's why then, when they start feeling anxious, they start feeling whatever, they know that they should just not rock the boat, stay unconscious, and that you just ignore things, but then it always comes out sideways. So that's why generationally, even if you think that, well, I didn't drink, why is my kid? You really have to look at what are the rules and messages that you're unconsciously sending to your family. And without blaming, please, I just want to be so clear. I believe every single person does the best that they can do with what they have. believe that in the best, even the worst situations, people are attempting, their behavior is inappropriate, dysfunctional, crazy as it might be, is an attempt to love, but just don't know how. So please don't beat yourself up if you're hearing some of this stuff and you're, oh my God. Please, because you're just doing the best you can. So I want to talk about some of the elements in a family with addiction that are damaging. So there's a shift and reversal of roles. So when I was a new therapist, this was fascinating. I had a client, his wife had been bitching like for 15 years, well, he stopped drinking, everything would be fine. Guy gets treated. Hurrah! 2 months later, go out to dinner. He became a drink, you've been doing so good. I've heard this at least 4 or 5 times. Right? Sounds crazy. Not really. If you're looking at things as a system, remember I told you, they want to put that teddy bear on there so that you can get things to be in balance again. It's not conscious, but it's uncomfortable being with somebody who now is available, who now might want to talk to you about things. Even though you're saying you want to talk to them, you grew up in a family where probably those rules like don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. So as awful as it is living with somebody with an active addiction, it's also tremendously uncomfortable when people, unless you're doing your work, when people get sober and get on track. And so things happen like with this client. All of a sudden, she went from being St. Mary, who the whole neighbor's like, oh God, I don't know what she does it, right? To the kids ignoring dad, he has no power because he's an idiot drunk, right? To all of a sudden, people, oh God, Jack is doing great. He must be so proud of him. No more St. Mary. Poor St. Mary. The kids, Dad, what time should I come in? So all of a sudden, this person that really wants that husband to be sober because she wasn't doing her own work and looking at what even attracted me to someone like this in the first place, she's unconsciously trying to sabotage because that's what's going to bring things back to what's normal and where she can feel a sense of power. Again, totally unconscious. But it's really important to hear this so you can take a look for yourself at some of your own behavior and some of the unconscious, what we call secondary gains, an unconscious benefit to things staying the same, even though you don't want them to. Okay, so all these are things that are damaging and often happen because of the unpredictability and inconsistency. Often the non-addicted parent is disturbed in their parental role because you're so chaotic and everything's so overwhelming that it takes up a lot of energy, and so it's really hard to be able to be present in parenting. There's blackouts, so you'll have somebody wake up the next morning and you'll say to them, Jesus, you were such a jerk last night, I can't believe you said blah, 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 blah. What are you talking about? And then they'll convince you that they didn't say that you're making it up, because they don't remember. So then you're furious, because if you think, yeah, they did say that, you're thinking, they're lying to me. And I'm not saying that people with addictions don't lie. They lie all the time, okay? But I am saying a lot of times, people really have a blackout, and they have no clue what they did. Okay. And that's one of the issues, too, that you run into is, well, I'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so dishonesty, you got that, miscommunication, volatile behavior, it's not uncommon. I've read research statistics that a lot of people that are in jail, right? It's always, majority of the time, they're under the influence of some kind of chemical. Same with physical violence, emotional, mental, verbal abuse, incest, sexual abuse. Things get blurred. People are not in their right mind. Alcohol goes and impacts the judgment center of the brain. It impairs it. So things happen that if somebody wasn't drinking, probably never would have happened. Social isolation, a lot of times because there's so much shame, that's shame-based families, there's so much shame in a family that people will isolate and stay away from being involved with neighbors, community, family. Okay. So, how can you tell you're at an Al-Anon meeting? Someone spills their coffee and everyone gets up to clean it. And then this is another one because Gordon Penn's going to do this. Son, we're stuck. Why are you giving us a hand with your homework?
Right? Gotta fix it, gotta make everything okay. All right, so, again, I'm not gonna go over these because you can look online, but the one I do wanna say is, don't be selfish. So what happens a lot of times when family members, loved ones start taking care of themselves, and it might be as simple as saying, I'm going out for an hour tonight. They feel guilty. They feel selfish. You're not. The irony is that usually the people who are very selfish never feel selfish. They never ask themselves, am I being selfish? But codependents are always like, I think you're being selfish. You just say no. Okay, you feel like, I've heard from clients that they said no, and it felt like they were screaming it, because it's hard to take care of yourself when you're not used to it. Okay, it's not okay to play or have fun, because this is serious stuff here. All right, don't rock the boat if things are okay. So let me give you an example. If somebody's a social drinker and they get smashed at a party and they act like an idiot, the next morning, chances are that their spouse will say to them, what the hell happened last night? You got smashed and you acted like an idiot, and I'm pissed off. Okay. Person says, yeah, I know, God, I don't know, I didn't eat, or, yeah, I've kind of been drinking a lot. I need to pull together, I'm sorry. They talk about it. If you got an alcoholic, they wake up, morning, everything seems okay. You walk on eggshells, you pretend it didn't happen. Because you don't want to rock the boat. Things are good right now, aren't they? Either that, or something comes up, and then it's a blaming. What the hell's wrong with you? They're shaming, blaming. Okay? So that's the difference. When there's an addiction, you're not able to sit and have a conversation about it because there's too much shame that's in there. All right. So you pretend things aren't that bad, and then you distract and keep attention away from the real issue. All right, so this is important. Your main way of communicating your needs, especially with the AP means addicted person. Sometimes I think I put PA in here too, so person with addictions. Back and forth. I'm a little, what's that word, dyslexic? Is cajoling, bitching, nagging, or manipulating. I'm sure none of you can relate to that, but just in case, or you know somebody, I thought I'd put it up there. Difficulty being honest with yourself and others. Having a hard time having healthy boundaries, rationalizing, deny, minimize dysfunctional situations. Often you feel helpless, afraid, overwhelmed, depressed, hopeless, and angry. You fear change and you see it as a threat rather than a natural part of life. This is what I was going to say to you. One of the differences between the person who's the addict and the family and loved ones is that the addict will go and they'll get sober. Right? And then they're like, this is good. I'm feeling great. Isn't this great? And you're still like demolished and devastated from years of putting up with this crazy behavior that they don't even remember half of it. So what happens is it's kind of like you went through surgery without an anesthetic. They had their anesthetic. They're coming up and out of it and going, wow, I feel really good. That surgery went really well. And you're like bleeding all over the table. So you need to be mindful that and a lot of times people just focus on the alcoholic instead of the family. And that's one of the reasons my colleague and I decided to put together these talks, because we're like, no, the family needs attention. You need people to say, hey, you need help too. It's not just if they get sober, then everything will be okay. Because it's not. Because there's a lot of woundedness. Today I was with a woman that her husband has been sober probably about 20 years. She's struggled with her eating. She's a compulsive overeater. For the first time, and I've seen her on and off for about 10 years. Actually, I saw her when he first got sober. Got her to go to Al-Anon. She comes back from time to time. For the first time ever, she talked about being angry with him, that she has struggled with her eating, and he'll look at her and go, you sure you want that? And she said, I spent years in Al-Anon. I read every book I could get my hands on about addiction so I could understand what he was going through. He's never done a damn thing to understand. He just thinks you need to lose 10 pounds, go lose 10 pounds. No clue. It's pretty typical. And she's been struggling to weight. And I said, I think your weight is an underground. So, okay. Part of it too is that you lack a sense, you can read through all these, but you lack a sense of real purpose in life because your purpose has been trying to fix this person, trying to survive what's going on, keep things together. If your husband or wife is like got their primary breadwinner, what are you going to do if they lose their job? So there's lots of, it's just an enormous amount of pressure and stress. And so therefore, often, your energy can be ungrounded, chaotic, draining, frantic, or shut down. A lot of times, friends, people who have someone in their life who's an addict are like, oh, enough already. I've been hearing about this for years. If any of you have experienced that, they kind of back away because your energy is just draining. Because you're depleted because of all that you're having to go through to keep all the balls balanced. I like this. What do you call a codependent person who says no to someone and does not feel guilty? Healthy. Okay. So here, a lot of this stuff we've already kind of talked about. You can look online, but these are common symptoms of family members. Well, mental health disorders, a lot of times anxiety, depression, compulsive behaviors. Medical complications. Don't know what's normal. There's a book called, I think it's on my list, What's Normal? Like my mother, she had no clue. She's using her life on the prairie as a way to know what's normal. We were having dinner once, Christmas dinner, and I have 9 siblings. And so we don't all get together that often as adults. And so we're there, and we are just having a blast with each other. Christmas, right? And my mother's like, dinner's ready. We're like, okay, we're coming in. But we're still on our way there. Oh my God. She went into a rage. And we're looking at each other, and I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute. Your adult kids are all here. You can see that they are loving being with each other, laughing, having a great time. And all you're worried about is that the food's going to get cold? Because it didn't fit her picture of the ideal family. So she's focused on that instead of what's really important, which is her kids are really connected. In fact, one time we did a Stephen help. It was great. An intervention on one of my brothers. And then something else came up in the family, so we had a family meeting. And a lot of us were getting help. And my mother looks around the table and she goes, wow, what is this, like one big happy, healthy circle except for me? Because she wouldn't get help. She wouldn't get help, right? And I know it's because she had so much stuff from her own childhood that was just too overwhelming. So not only was my grandfather an alcoholic, but her mother got killed in a car accident by an alcoholic when she was 8. Right? So, where would my mom have had coping skills for the feelings of the tremendous grief that she probably had inside of her? But instead she tortured us. So, all right. So, Mom, this joke's for you. What does a codependent have in common with God? They both have a plan for your life. Okay? And then I like these, and these two sit, neck to neck. Codependency is a possibility. All right, defense mechanisms. You can see that, the rationalizing, minimizing, displacing your feelings about things that, really it's like, what is this about? Is this really about the hummus that you don't want me to make? Right? I just had to happen this week. Somebody knew her husband's from an alcoholic family. Okay, depression, very common. Anyway, you can see all this stuff. I don't think I need to go through it all. But I love this quote. It's not what happens to you, rather how you respond to what happens to you. That's critical. Now this is the best thing I ever learned in all my years as a therapist. And I'm sorry I'm going to have to whip through this. What time do we have to stop? 10 after, John?
No, we can keep going. Go to, 8:20, 8:30.
Okay. So I want you to know, really, this is the best thing. And this was by this woman named Virginia Satir, who was a family therapist. She was one of the first people that, when Stephen and I were going to school for therapy, people weren't doing family therapy. They were just doing like, you come in and you come in, and usually it's the identified patient. But then this was one of the pioneers, this woman, Virginia Satir, who was just magical. I used to see her in videos. I never got to go to one of her, see her in person, but I just loved seeing her. How she was with families was just so beautiful. But she started bringing families together. And she started talking to the family, and especially her focus was on learning how to communicate with each other. But this was something she came up with, so I stole it from her, and in her honor, I pass it on in the world. So she talked about when we go through change, there are stages we go through. And the first change is the status quo, what's familiar, not necessarily comfortable. Like what I was telling you about. So let's use this. Let's say somebody's an active alcoholic. It's not comfortable waking up with a hangover, but it is familiar. Okay? So something shifts. Maybe they get told at work that they're going to lose their job, or they're just sick and tired of feeling like crap. Or maybe they're threatened with a divorce. Whatever. But something changes. Often it's a crisis, but it can also be something positive. It can be anything. It could be a new baby. That's why a lot of times people are shocked, like somebody sabotages positive things. Yeah, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. So usually I have a little thing and I go from here to here, right? So you just have to watch my hands. So then what you do is, when that happens, when something shifts, and if any of our realtors, this is actually, what do they call it? The realtor, when they have the anxiety, what do you call it? If you buy a house. Yeah, that's what this is about. It's the anxiety. So what happens is you go into a state of chaos, no matter how great it is. State of chaos. The main feeling during that time is anxiety. Now what I've been showing you is how ill-equipped people in families where there's addictions, even if it's 2-3 generations, how ill-equipped they are to know how to deal with their feelings. And then if you have an anxiety problem to begin with, you may as well just throw gasoline on it. Really. So what happens is then they go from here back up to the status quo. This is one of the main reasons why people relapse from addictions. It's also reasons you see like battered partners going back to the relationship. I was like, what? She finally got out of there? Things are better? He went back? You know why? Couldn't manage the anxiety. Did not know how to. But if you can learn how to manage the anxiety, then what happens is you begin to practice and learn new behaviors. So let's go back to the alcoholic example. So let's say you get sober, you're feeling totally anxious, but you start going to AA meetings, and you get a sponsor. And the first time you walk into an AA meeting, 95% of you is anxious as all get out. But 5% is a little excited, because there's some hope. So then what happens is you learn, and you practice these new behaviors. It might be for a codependent saying no about something. You know, I remember when I first got in this business, I was running a halfway house for women alcoholics and drug addicts. That was my first job out of graduate school. And kind of had a little bit of a challenge with some of the men that were working at the men's program because I wasn't an alcoholic, so kind of that, I had no credibility for that. And so it was interesting because they would say things like, just don't drink, go to meetings, get laid. Like, that was their idea of feeling, seriously, that was a guy's idea of therapy. All right? So, but you need to learn and practice new behaviors, like learn how to talk about your feelings, maybe. Learning how to not walk down the same block where your favorite bar is. And go a different way. Learn how to, when you get home from work and normally you have a drink, maybe you go out for a walk or you call a friend. Or you're upset, so, but you're practicing this. Remember, practice. I get to kind of do all, right? And then you have a new status quo. So now you've been sober a year or so. And now it's normal to not drink. Now you can walk into an AA meeting any place in the world and feel comfortable. But guess what happens? You go back, life's about change. So there's always a new status quo. So maybe you're sober and it's the first time you're going to have sex with somebody without drinking. So again, go through the whole thing. But if you haven't learned how to manage your anxiety or how to deal with it, you're going to keep going back to that status quo over and over again. So if any of you are feeling stuck in a relationship that you know is toxic and you really need to get out of, this is why. Because you have to learn how to deal with your anxiety. You have to learn and practice new behaviors that are going to become the norm. So we're always changing, we're always growing, but we have to learn how to be able to be in our bodies. That's where anxiety is. And so you have to remember, a lot of what's happening in families where there's addictions is that you're doing things to get away from yourself, so you're not in your body. You're leaving your body, you're dissociating, and what that means is that a lot of times with incest survivors, this will happen, or rape survivors, is that they will remember what happened and they'll be able to see themselves like looking at what was happening from the ceiling looking down. They'll remember what was happening and they'll see that that's how they cope. They literally left their bodies as a way to survive the experience. I had a client that every time that her uncle would come in to molest her, she would imagine herself out in her backyard on the swing set. So she could be there but not be there at the same time. Actually, human beings are ingenious in our ability to cope with things. We really are. So that's, okay. So I want you just to think about that. So that's one of the reasons why if you need help, don't expect that you should know this stuff right away. Just like we didn't know how to do math, most of us, before we went to school. We learned, we had to practice, it was homework. So, but also what happens, this is the cool thing I really love, is that as you get conscious, remember, spend a lot of time keeping yourself unconscious because it's too painful and uncomfortable. But as you learn how to be more conscious, what happens is, as you go through these changes, there's a sense of faith, there's a sense of security that you develop inside, so that something else comes up. Maybe it's time to get a new job. You know you need a new job. What you begin to say is, hey, I got through whatever it was, and I'm okay. You know how many people I've seen that have gotten divorced and thought it was going to be the end of their life? I had a guy a little while ago that I said to him, a few years ago, I said, listen, been married 20-some years, a bunch of kids, wife left him. I'm going to tell you something. You do your work, you'll be sending her a thank you note in 2 years. A year and a half later, he came in and said, you're right. But he did his work, and he looked at his part in what was going on. That's the piece I ask you guys tonight, because I'm telling you, I get it, how easy it is to make it about them. But if you don't look at your part in the dance, you're going to be stuck. Just be in that status quo over and over and over again. And you're not going to help the person you love, because they're staying in the same dance with you. Whereas if you learn how to not call in sick for somebody, or how to let them lay in their puke, or whatever it might be, that you're not giving money, that you know they're going to use on drugs or alcohol, whatever it is that you need to set some limits with, when you start doing that, you actually give them an opportunity to get better. And one of the things that can help you is, part of the learning and practicing new behaviors is that's what, Al-Anon can do. Or maybe get into a group, but you need to be places where you're around other people that can give you ideas about how they handle things, who can support you, can help you with your feelings. I have a brother that when his son developed an opioid addiction, I was blown away that he sent a letter out to our family and his closest friends saying, this is what's going on. Please pray for my son. Now, if my other brother hadn't gotten sober, he could never have done that. But he learned that it was really important for people to let people know that he and his wife were really having a rough time, and so was my nephew. And the truth is, not everybody, it's not always going to be a happy ending. I know people who died from this addiction. I have to remember that myself, actually, because I know so many people that are in long-term recovery and have these incredible lives that you wouldn't even know, who they were. In fact, it was funny, when my brother got sober, or had his 30-year sober anniversary, we had a party for him. And his daughter, his kids were born after he'd been sober, probably at least 8 years. And his daughter got up and she said, I've been hearing all these stories about my dad when he was using. She said, Dad, I can't thank you enough that I never had to see you like that. It was so moving and so touching. But that's not always the way it ends. And people worry about it. They say, well, he or she could die if I don't go rescue them. But the truth is, they could die anyway. And in the meantime, you're exhausted, depleted, and everybody else is feeling impacted and overwhelmed. So think of it like when you get on a plane and they say, hey, if, you remember, the oxygen mask comes down, put it on you first, because you're not going to be able to help anybody else otherwise. This is the same thing. Okay, so, what it might look like if you redefine what it means to love an addicted person. Okay, it would mean that you get educated, like you're doing tonight, about addictions, the same way you would if they had cancer or any other illness. You'd find out all about it. It would also then mean, as a result of this education, you could begin to stop taking things personally and understand that this is their disease. It's not about you. It would mean, even though you're upset, you could learn how to stop being reactive and blaming. It would mean that you could look at your part of what's going on and what or how you need to change. It would mean that you learn how to disengage and have neutral reactions to their behavior and words and let them experience natural consequences. It would mean you learn that you need to stop any enabling behavior and set boundaries as a way of helping the person you love. It would mean that you do not ask someone to do what you are not willing to do, like get help or honestly look at your own use of alcohol and drugs. I've seen a lot of family members, again, it goes back to the identified patient. Why do I need to go to Al-Anon? Why do I need to get help? They're the ones with the problem. But if you want to show someone you love them, and do what you need to do to take care of yourself and look at your part of it and get help. And a lot of times you find people that are from addictive families, they have parents that have their own issues. If they're not addicts, they might be abusing alcohol or drugs. Okay, it would mean that you begin through your own healing and the help of others to love and trust yourself and gain more confidence in your knowing about what the right thing is to do. Because no one, I don't care how many years experience anybody's had, myself included, I don't know what's right for somebody. I don't. I have a cousin who committed suicide who had a cocaine addict. The irony was that his parents, my aunt and uncle, were going to Famous Anonymous meetings, they were going for counseling. I think my parents maybe went to 2 Al-Anon meetings. My brother gets sober, their kid hangs himself. So, you don't know. You never know. I might have one other thing I want to share before we end. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, and it would also mean, and I know I'm saying it again, but in a different way, that you would stop trying to fix and control to get them to get it. Okay? You know that energy, right? You're like, ah. When you get in that energy, take a few deep breaths, go to the bathroom, go for a walk. It's not going to help. It's like saying the same thing over and over to them. They go, It's not any different. When you're in that energy, not helpful to you, not helpful to them. So, I took a class 37 years ago with this amazing priest, and he said something. This is so ironic because I have a chapter in my book that is named Miracles Seeing the Same Thing from a New Perspective. And I hadn't seen him in a while, and I got together and I said, I'm going to give you my book, and I want to thank you for this. I use this quote all the time with clients, and I use it in my book, and I said that? You're right, thinking this is this awesome thing, right? And you didn't even remember. But I do think it's awesome, and I think it's true. A miracle is seeing the same thing from a new perspective, and that's what I'm inviting you to do tonight. And then the other thing I think is very pragmatic. We cannot change things to our feelings. Feelings are really important. I'm probably way more into feelings than Stephen is in terms of doing therapy, right? I'm a girl, that's all. Okay? But you can change your behavior. You can make a choice to change your behavior, even if you don't want to, even if it feels horrible, just to try something newer. You might have heard somebody say, hey, why don't you try this? Like go to an Al-Anon meeting or call a therapist if you need some help. And your feelings will follow. So, I don't know about you, but my sitting around thinking, yeah, I gotta start feeling like I'm gonna go and work out. Yeah? No. What I do is get my ass to the gym, and I do it over and over and over again, and then I'm liking what's going on. I'm liking how I feel. And now I feel like I want to go. It's normal. So remember that. If you change your feelings or your behaviors, your feelings will follow. But if you're waiting for your feelings to change, not gonna happen. Same with other people. So, anyway, thank you so much for being here. This is a wonderful, this Thrive organization, it's just really a wonderful place and such great programs. And if I had a family, I would want to live in Oak Park, but I don't have kids, so I live in the city by the lake. But it really is, I've always loved this community, and I have some wonderful friends here, even you, Terry. And I want to thank you for having me here tonight, and I hope this is helpful, and God bless you as you move on.